Today, we're commemorating Sunday's World Migrant and Refugee Day. Pope Francis has announced that the theme for the 107th World Day for the Migrants and Refugees is the ever wider we. Due to the collapse of Venezuela's economic, political, and social systems, we have seen an influx of Venezuelan nationals to the shores of TNT. In this episode, we will explore the work of the Archdiocese's Ministry for Migrants and Refugees to meet the needs of this most vulnerable population and answer the call of Pope Francis to embrace those most in need.
The humanitarian crisis in Venezuela has resulted in the displacement of many children, some of whom are separated from their families and are therefore living without parental care or guardianship. Children like 7-year-old Carolina, 13-year-old Maria, and 16-year-old Luis. Carolina was 7 when she was separated from her mother and sent ahead to Trinidad with an extended family member for a chance at a better life, including access to food. The family now struggles to take care of her and often leave her alone, unsupervised. Maria is 13. Her mother died when she was much younger, and her father was too ill to join her on the journey. She journeyed to Trinidad unaccompanied by any relatives. She was promised an opportunity for an education, but is required to repay the cost for the journey and needs money to send back to her dad. Luis had a chaotic life back at home in Venezuela and has been living alone since he was 14. Now 16, he believes that his chances for survival were better in Trinidad. He haggled on the streets and eventually saved enough money to make the trip. Luis does odd jobs around the neighborhood to survive. Without the security of a safe home, children like Carolina, Maria, and Luis have a higher risk of being sexually exploited, physically abused, and experiencing other forms of neglect, violence, and exploitation. These risks can be reduced through temporary care arrangements that ensure children are supported in family settings that provide a safe, loving home and adult supervision. To support unaccompanied and separated children like Carolina, Maria, and Luis, the Archdiocese's Ministry for Migrants and Refugees, in collaboration with UNICEF and other national state agencies, has launched an alternative care program seeking the support of families willing to provide temporary care to these children. If you know children in your community with similar stories and who are in need of care and support, or if you are interested in being a part of the program, please contact us at 743-5906 or email us at cmo.ammr@catholictt.org. It takes a community to protect a child.
This last Sunday was World Migrants and Refugees Day, and the theme for commemoration of this day is the ever wider we. And Pope Francis speaks to this idea of embracing all in society, especially the most vulnerable, in which the migrant and refugee does fall. Now, we have seen a significant influx of migrants and refugees, in particular those coming from Venezuela, over the last 5 years. And as such, the Catholic Commission for Social Justice has done a lot of work under our co-organization, the Archdiocese Ministry for Migrants and Refugee, the AMMR, in reaching this most vulnerable population. Now, Pope Francis calls on all Catholics to welcome, promote, protect, and integrate all those within society so we can embrace and work towards an ever wider we. No longer is it about the individual, no longer is it about the throwaway culture, but rather now we're working to a place of community. So it really gives me a lot of pleasure here today to introduce two of my wonderful team members. We have Mr. Matthew Pear, who is our Community Liaison Officer, and we have the beautiful Zahira Mohammed, who is our coordinator for our child-friendly spaces. So I'm going to immediately ask Matthew to step in at this point, who is right now, very excitingly, based at UE's chaplaincy, undertaking the advocate program. So Matthew, I really want to speak to you on two things immediately. First off, what is the advocate program? And then coming out of that, what can you give us a general idea of what kind of work the AMMR does in reaching this most vulnerable population.
Thank you, Dominique, for that beautiful introduction. And thank you for first letting me begin by introducing the advocacy program, okay? So it's officially the Social Justice Advocacy Program, and it's our attempt to have a volunteer work program to train our Catholic human resources for parish ministry action. All right, so it has that dimension, and it's also as a pseudo type of internship experience to help the AMR achieve its objectives and assist our parish ministries. Okay, so that for me would be the primary purpose of the advocacy program, because what it does is that it goes into each of the communities that maybe has or does not have a parish ministry and attempts to help them with the work that they are involved in, whatever type of outreach they have. Okay, and we also try to include a refugee day, which is what I will speak about a little bit more. Okay, so in terms of how the parishes had responded with the influx of migrants into our communities, we would begin to observe the increase of migrants coming within our communities. Okay, we see them on our way to work, the places we frequent, you know, and we observe the change in our demographic. All right, so that would be the first indicator that something's happening. Okay. And then you see it more common that within our streets, our neighbors are more Spanish speaking. All right, you understand that these families are different, and you begin to see the reality of the problem in Venezuela actually beginning to affect us where we are in our local communities. So first we observe that change. And then how the church began to respond is first on the individual level, like definitely how I became involved in our ministry in Arima, because I'm from the parish of Santa Rosa and Malabar. One of our parishioners took it upon herself to go out and meet our migrants. And normally when it is they first came here, they would live in community. All right, and they live in some conditions that are not even very habitable or very comfortable. You know, like the first community I went and visited, they were living on a farm. All right, and they were living in stables, which was meant for horses. So there was no kind of accommodation suitable for them. All right, and there were like many families there. First there were 12 families, and then I went to another community where I had about 34 persons living in, again, just these box makeshift kind of houses. So I think most of our migrants ministries would have begun when our Archbishop would have made the call. All right, he made a plea. He would like to have all of our parishes establish migrants and refugees ministries to aid these migrants who are coming here, who are basically forced to come here because of the situation of no food in their country. There's no safety in their country. They're being victimized for not supporting the political party in power. All right. And then also, I've even heard reports of like at various times, like there was little famines in different parts of the country, which would contribute to the food sources. There's high inflation. And you can only begin to see yourselves when it is you meet them and you're able to speak with them, you begin to see yourself in their situation. What would I do if I was in that situation? All right. And then you see how it's affecting their not only their sanity, but their peace of mind and their even hope. All right. And for me, providing that hope for them was an important aspect, you know, like please don't think that we don't care. You know, we do care and we want the better for you. We understand we're standing in solidarity with your suffering. Okay, so that's how the parish ministries began to start, specifically with our the call from His Grace, but also from the pockets of individual persons attempting to reach out and help the migrant community on a one-on-one. All right. In terms of the outreaches these parish ministries do, well, Dominique, it's quite varied. Okay, because it's based on the capacity of each of the ministries. All right, so the most basic one, of course, will be food and clothing. All right, because that is something that, you know, we need to eat every single day. And if it is they can't work, if it is they don't have access to family and friends where they're living to ask for help, you know, this will be the basic thing. They're coming with basically nothing. All right, if only the clothes on their backs. Okay, so most of the parish outreaches have food and clothing. And then other ministries, they would attempt to provide other type of services. All right. So in terms of healthcare, they would try to provide at least medications for them, for persons with ailments. All right. In the case of pregnant women and pregnancies, they will accompany them to the hospital. All right. And also, if it is that they need to even have private care, some ministries will even attempt to provide that extra help in not only referring them, but also helping them get that more private or advanced care that they may need. All right. Because as you would know, migrants are only able to get primary services in Trinidad, and like that's emergency services, etc. Okay. Right, and then some would go advanced. So there are others who would involve in like the housing issue. All right, so there are certain parish ministries that have attempted to find housing for migrants. They mediated with landlord issues.
And I really want to interject here to give a little context to the persons tuning in. You know, the reality is Trinidad and Tobago, we're not dissimilar, you know, from Venezuela in a lot of ways. Oil and gas rich country. We haven't failed to diversify, arguably, and to make the Venezuelan situation even more contextually relevant and real. You know, a few years ago, even though, yes, Venezuela was a socialist state dominated by Hugo Chavez, it was the richest country in Latin America.
Yes.
It yes, really was, you know, and it imploded very quickly. The hyperinflation that they have undergone. Mm-hmm. Now, Matthew, this was really great to see that the Catholic Church is stepping up and reaching out to this vulnerable population at a community level, because intervention is very much needed. Pope Francis tells us that we must protect and integrate into society, because the reality is this is not a situation that most migrants and refugees choose. They don't choose for their homes to implode, as Venezuela did, economically, socially, politically. So, and it could happen anywhere, arguably.
Yes, and may I also share a story? One of the migrants, actually, not just one, but a few of them, all right, but one that I'm close to, she told me that what we see in Trinidad and Tobago is what they saw before the collapse of their own government. You know, the hyperinflation, the rise in crime, the amount of corruption, you know? So there's a lot of signs that is happening within our own country right now that can lead to a collapse. So don't think that we're immune, all right, to what is happening in Venezuela. All right, so we need to stand in solidarity with these people who are suffering now, because who knows, in the future we may have a similar situation. All right, and look, the pandemic that has caused a huge strain on our economy. You can see many families, local families, also with their difficulties and suffering. But thankfully, we have a government who is stable right now, you know, who can care for us. We have our family and friends to take care of us. All right. So, but the signs are there, so we shouldn't ignore it. All right. And we shouldn't treat Venezuelans and other migrants, because they're trying to better their lives and looking for hope. We shouldn't treat them as less than human. Yeah. We need to show that love of Christ for the poor, in the poor as well too.
You know, I'm glad you said that, Matthew, because, you know, we love to say here in Trinidad and Tobago, God is a Trinity. So if God is a Trinity and you've just beautifully brought in Christ, if Christ God is a Trinity, what would Christ do?
Yes.
Exactly that.
Yes, and let me remind you guys as well, to all our viewers, that Venezuela is very Catholic, more Christian than our own nation, which is very diverse, you know? And look what happened to a believing country, all right? And that would have been because of, you know, whatever reasons, okay? Whatever artificial reasons, all right? So don't think that God is a Trinity. That's not the most healthy opinion, okay?
Well, I disagree with you there. I disagree with you. I think.
Okay, that's fine.
No, but I think it is that we as Trinidadians and we as Catholics, we need to be more inclusive. We need to be universal. We need to get down to the core of Catholicism. And obviously, we know that Catholic means universal. And we need to embrace and see, as you perfectly said just now, see our neighbor and the most vulnerable in society as our brother, because that could happen to us.
Yes.
So how
Yes.
would we want to be treated if we were put into that situation? You know, and I'm now going to bring Zahira into the conversation. Now, Zahira, let me give our viewers a little context, and thank you for joining us today. The reality is many of the most vulnerable within the migrant and refugee population itself are the children. People are in truly desperate situations and they send their children unaccompanied to Trinidad and Tobago for, you know, just in hope of a better life, because things really became very dire in Venezuela. As Matthew rightly said, the inflation, no food, famine in a lot of areas. So Zahira, what actually happened with regards to these children coming to the shores of TNT without parental or even proper adult supervision?
Yes, absolutely. So we have both children who will come in groups with their families and children who will come unaccompanied and separated children. And at EMMR, we would have the alternative care program that, we find caring families to help foster these unaccompanied and separated children to give them a home. And for all of these children, including those unaccompanied and separated, we would have child-friendly spaces. So pre-COVID-19, we would have had physical spaces, which I believe catered to over 400 children within the different parishes. And now that we've gone virtually because of COVID, of course, at this moment, we have about over 300 children virtually within those spaces. However, it is difficult in giving them some form of education and holistic engagement virtually, because device issues and Wi-Fi issues, which links to the accommodation situations, of having a lot of them living in one space, or barely even being able to afford rent, which comes into links it back to the employment issues, that there aren't enough jobs around, or the jobs that are available to them, maybe one member in the family that's working. So in being able to afford internet for their children or device, there are some families that we have within the child-friendly spaces that are 5 to 1 cell phone. And they all have to share that with work and social life, and and getting into these sessions for the classes within the child-friendly spaces. But our child-friendly spaces do help as much as we can in giving that informal education, as there is not access to migrant and refugee children to the public education system in Trinidad and Tobago, which is a huge setback, and very, very disappointing, I will say, that we've not been able to give these children a proper education since that they've been here. And I think in welcoming and promoting and integrating not just these families, but the children in particular, which are, the most vulnerable within those groups, we do need to have proper access to education for them. And this will definitely greatly affect their futures and their families' futures and generations to come, because of their displacement. This will definitely affect their future standard of living, their family's current standard of living, their protection as well, not being enrolled in schools, not being enrolled in a safe space, not having access to those safe space and protection is a huge issue. And that also comes into play with unaccompanied and separated children that may cross the border alone, or even within groups for themselves. They are still children and still extremely vulnerable when there are not proper welcoming programs in place to prevent them from maybe seeking refuge in illegal or the wrong hands, which plays into human trafficking. We would like to think everyone out there, would like to help, but that's just not the case. So in implementing proper welcoming programs for these children, get into the system, whether it's with child-friendly spaces, alternative care, or anyone else that can help, is extremely important for their safety, and also for being accounted for and reported on. It's extremely important to account for all of these children that cross the border, because when they're not accounted for and they're left behind, then there's no one looking out for them, and they are definitely put into more risk and more danger in being human trafficked, abused, exploited, which is all part of our child protection program within the child-friendly spaces, as well as the alternative care program.
So I actually want to raise 2 points that you've made there really wonderfully, Zahira. First is this idea that we must integrate these children into our society, because the truth is these are future citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. There's very little hope in returning to Venezuela. So it's best for us as a collective if we welcome and integrate especially the children, so that they can become full functioning members of our society now, because they're not going anywhere. And then also the psychosocial aspect of the child-friendly spaces, because as you rightly said, the child-friendly spaces really happened organically. These children came unaccompanied and also with their families, and they came to their parishes because, as Matthew rightly said, Venezuela is a predominantly Catholic nation. So they came seeking support from their parish churches. And Matthew, you could probably speak to this a little bit more in a second, but these child-friendly spaces started to happen organically within the parishes because we don't have the policies and the laws and the provisions to properly integrate these children into school, into our public school system. But we also do know that the government is doing their part to ensure that this happens as quickly as possible. But
yes. And what I can say as well, Dominique, like some parish ministries even started with a child-friendly space, or at least some form of educational outreach, because they understood the right of education. That's a human right, So the child-friendly spaces, I can think of La Romaine, I can think of Carapi Chima's parish ministry, I can think of Pinal's parish ministry. They all started with child-friendly spaces because they saw the need that these children are suffering. You don't want a poverty of mind as well too. And then you have also the spaces that are protecting them from danger, which is the primary purpose of these child-friendly spaces. You want to protect these children from danger, from trafficking, from sexual exploitation, violence, things that migrant children that has a high risk of, and even traumatic experiences as well too. So yeah, it formed organically, all right, and thanks to our partner UNICEF, we got supported in this area as well too, all right, and we are very happy to have this with it as part of one of the outreaches of our Catholic Church, our Catholic community, because as you know, we have the experience of establishing churches for our own locals, and that's very fully developed. So we now extending that help to our migrant community, because in God's eyes, we are all one, we are all his children. Yeah, and there are no real differences in, he came easy, Jew and the Greek, So that's our philosophy. You taking care of the common good, you're aiming for the common good and the good of everyone.
That's so beautifully said. Thank you so much, Matthew. And again, to build on that point, going back to this idea that we are Catholic, we are universal, and we're called to integrate everybody. But, one of the big things that keeps coming up, especially within our local populations, is that, well, what about our vulnerable locals? What about our vulnerable children? Human trafficking, is not a new thing for us within Trinidad and Tobago. We have our own locals who go missing. So why should we put resources behind this new population who have just come when we have our own issues? And I actually want to highlight at this point, in support of that, some of the programs that the AMMR does to support the wider population. and beyond the AMMR, the Catholic Commission for Social Justice, because it is our mandate to serve and protect and to ensure that the human rights of the entire population, all of the vulnerable, are promoted and rightly served. So,
Yes.
I'd like to also speak to our programs that we have going. For example, the Legal Aid Clinic, which
Yes,
is
I was just about to mention
well,
that.
I will
Yes.
let you speak to it, Matthew. Go ahead.
All right, so our legal aid, as you mentioned it, is one of our new programs, and it is an attempt to provide legal aid services to both the migrant community and our local community. All right, because well, it's mostly geared to our migrants because they have their challenges with their legal status, their political status, etc., and the victimization as well too. All right, so we attempt to provide advice and counsel and try to get some help towards both the migrant community and the local community. In terms of healthcare, let me first say the AMMR is a new organization. It's small. It's now developing itself, okay? So we have a few outreaches at the moment, and we're expanding as we go along. So we also have our healthcare outreaches. We started a healthcare campaign in February of this year, and thus far we've had 3 outreaches in Arima, Malabar, and UE chaplaincy. And we had attempted to do that throughout the whole year. However, the COVID-19 pandemic lockdowns and SOE put a nail in that, put a stop to that. Then we also have our migrant speaker, which is what you, Dominic, lead, and Ambrosio would lead as well too, to advocate for our migrants and refugees and tell their stories and give them a voice.
And I want to make now a call to our viewers. What do you think we should do? Please put your comments in the comments box. What do you think? How do you think? Because we're always open to new ideas and innovation. How do you think we can best reach this population, this vulnerable population? And beyond that, all vulnerable populations that we have within TNT. And that goes for our locals together. Now, Zahira, I really would like to hear a little bit more on our child-friendly spaces. So I'm gonna ask you a magic wand question. In your ideal world, if you had a magic wand, what would you do with the child-friendly spaces? How best would you develop that wonderful program that is coming? But with the aim, as you've rightly said, of bringing these kids to a more stable emotional and psychological state, and then when they are allowed to enter our school system, bringing them to a place where they can enter seamlessly and then integrate wonderfully with our own children. How would you see that looking?
Yes, absolutely. So in our child-friendly spaces, if I had to imagine this, I will say that it is actually somewhat in the works right now, my magic wand. So because we can't have access for formal education for the children, primary and secondary schools, we have been working on doing a set syllabus or curriculum for the child-friendly spaces, so that eventually the hope is to be able to give them some form of certification or accreditation within child-friendly spaces. And this will definitely help them since they don't have access to things like SCA or CXC examinations, which is the typical way in getting a job. You'll have your passes at CXC, or you go to CAPE, or you have access to tertiary education as locals. But of course, that is not open to the migrants and refugee, and nor is there any help for the children in terms of how GAPE may work for us. So my magic wand will definitely be some sort of formal education for the children, both primary and secondary. For the older kids who may be at the Form 5 age level or Form 6 age level, I would absolutely love programs, which we are also working on, having a professional mentoring program to mentor these older kids so that they're able to acquire jobs after they leave, and they have the skill sets more than the regular work jobs that are available to them, such as cleaners and labor workers for the men. And in this as well, I would absolutely love for some labor rights for the migrants and refugees in the workplaces, some work policies ensuring that they get the proper pay and that they're protected in the workspace, because these will also affect the children in the years to come, and even those who are of legal age right now and they're growing out. They would have come here when they were 14 or 15. Now they are 18 and 19, and they are within the working world and they're within that age. So these will greatly affect them. So that will be my magic wand for them. And I absolutely would love in integration and promoting a more appreciation for their culture locally, because these greatly affect the kids in feeling comfortable and in getting along with locals as well. There's a lot of xenophobia, which also reflects and affects back on the children. And I think when people hold these ideals in their mind, they sometimes forget that these are children and these are a vulnerable group. And it's young persons that we're dealing with. And it's not their peer, it's not their adults, it's not their equal. So I absolutely would love for those things to happen, for there to have some proper education, formal education, some access to formal education, proper work policies in place which will affect the children, more options to explore skill sets and jobs for those migrants and refugees who are already doctors and lawyers, but no one will hire them regardless of if they speak English, because of the xenophobia that's very, very
Yes, it's rampant. And I'm glad you raised that point, because it makes me think, and this wasn't too long ago, it was widely reported in the newspapers that poor doctor outside San Fernando General Hospital, who was living on the streets and was being heckled by vagrants. And she had actually been turned out. It was prior to the last lockdown that we had, and she had been turned out by the family she was working with, because I can't specifically speak to the reason why, but it had been reported that they couldn't continue to support her during or help her during the lockdown period. And these are not uncommon situations, right there at the UE's chaplaincy, where there is a lot of support for the migrant and refugee population. Speaking very, off the cuff with Sister Sandra, she had mentioned that some of the migrants and refugees that they had staying with them were lawyers. And this is exactly it. We're seeing these professionals. We want to believe that, these are people who are coming and they're going to be a strain on society, but these are skilled laborers. And as we're taught within our Catholic doctrine, we're not all empty vessels. We come with skills and talents that we can readily share with the community that we're settling in. So, Matthew, I'm going to come back to you to speak about how parish outreaches have continued to integrate these populations.
Well, Dominic, let me first piggyback on what you were saying, all right? Because you raised a brilliant point there, they're coming with their gifts, all right? And if I had a magic wand, I would ask for some kind of way out of dependency, at least give them a way to not be a strain on our society by being able to contribute to society, all right? Because I can tell you stories of migrants as well too, one that I know as well very well. He's so super qualified, but he can't get employment here. He can't get he even started his own business, all right, hiring his own fellow workers as well too, all right, but he can't, for some reason, register the business in his name. He needs a local, so they need to have the opportunity to help themselves and contribute to our society, and and in that way they won't be a strain to our economy, all right. And I would also maybe advocate for even some part of residency, because a resident isn't a citizen, all right. They're not guaranteed the same privileges as citizens, but they have the ability to improve their lives and at least enjoy basic protections. All right, so maybe we should have really a refugee law or some sort. Okay. Continuing with our parish ministry outreaches, we do also, especially for those parishes that do not have established child-friendly spaces, there are some type of educational outreaches, all right? So I know some persons, especially during the lockdown, they would have had virtual classes or conversational programs with the migrant community as well too, all right? And also maybe even physical classes before the COVID pandemic had happened. All right, and even if they couldn't have classes, they would purchase Spanish literature or material so that persons can go back home and learn, all right, develop their skills and so forth. So some parishes have done that. Of course, being a Catholic institution and being Catholic church, there's also some faith building activities as well. All right, so there is virtual, how do you call it, Bible sessions, which is actually something we've just started as well too with our own Father Poyer. As one of our outreaches to the migrant community. So we're celebrating virtual Mass.
Matthew, I'm so excited and thank you for raising that point. And I'm sorry to cut you here, but I would like to actually highlight the Facebook page that Matthew is speaking to, where we do have Spanish Bible study classes, as well as on Sundays, a Spanish Mass, the AMMR Catholic Ministry Community. Please like and follow and support that Facebook page. I'll say, so please continue, Matthew, continue with what you're saying. I apologize.
Yes, I was talking about the parish ministry outreaches. So some ministries would even have social integration events, all right, to have that collaboration and mixing, encourage the mixing of the cultures, because normally you have hostility within communities when you don't see, when you don't experience, when you don't know the person's one-on-one. You know, we'll talk about people behind their backs, but not in their faces. Why? Because we see the reality. All right. So I think that has been the most effective way of reaching persons and changing the minds of locals in particular. When it is they see that there really is not much difference between them and us. All right. So some ministries do encourage that integration. So they would have children's days, a children's party for Christmas. All right, for one example, or a movie night, or take them on I know some ministries took them to the zoo, the Emperor Valley Zoo, to encourage the integration and do not fear the other.
The
all right,
of the other. And I'm glad you've highlighted a couple of points there. So the first is, Hira, you were telling me off air that this is something that the CFS spaces will also be trying to do more of, more reaching out into community and taking these migrant and refugee children on outings and really helping them understand this new environment they're in, so they can again be best integrated. But also, I mean, for me, it's like the elephant in the room, you know, the integration of the Venezuelan population. We all want to say like this is something new, but the reality is the Venezuelan population, we are all descendants somewhere from Venezuela. We all have, you know, and we see it at Christmas time with our parang, with our food, with our pastels. Also, Venezuela has a carnival very similar to us. You know, we have been integrating with Venezuela for years. The only significant difference is now it's en masse and it's involuntary. But I think what we need to really highlight is that it's involuntary on both sides. This is not something that these people have chosen to come to a new land, face this level of hardship, and the psychosocial fallout is significant. Now, I'm not saying it's easy for either party. It's not easy for the Venezuelans, nor is it easy for the local population. But we need to find some way to come together, because as Pope Francis has wonderfully said, and it encapsulates everything, you know, we are all interconnected. This World Migrant and Refugee Day, which has been celebrated on the 26th of September, which was Sunday, you know, we must work towards an ever wider we. And this is not just one day, this, which we highlight this is now going to be a way of life for us. We must integrate. We must come together in community. So to kind of close off this interview now, I want to ask both of you to really share what, again, make a call to our local population. How can we integrate? How can we make peace within ourselves first? And so we can offer our brothers and sisters peace. Matthew, I'm going to start with you.
Sure. Thank you, Dominic. Well, I would really call persons to see their humanity, see them as one of us, because we have the same humanity. All right. And we should value life more than anything else. All right. We shouldn't value anything else greater than life. Okay. And they are in need. We need to protect their lives. All right. And I also want us to protect our own reputation as Trinidad and Tobago nationals. All right. Because they are coming to experience our culture. And when they leave, some of them will leave. They will go and say, well, in Trinidad, this and that, so and so is that kind of people. All right. So protect our own reputation and the view others see us as. We need to be hospitable. All right. And we need to be able to let people see the good side of us. Of course, there's bad. All right. But when it is you love your neighbor as yourself, all right, and you welcome the stranger in your midst, it's more likely that they're going to give they're going to have a good word in their mouth about us. So let's think of our own national reputation as well too. For when it's our turn now, when it is that we are in need. So we haven't had a great disaster. The last one we had was the flooding. All right, and all the countries of the Caribbean came together and helped us. All right, so when we have a greater need now, we want persons to say, you know what, Trinidad and Tobago, they are a friendly nation. They help others. All right, and when we were in need, they came to our help. They didn't discriminate. They didn't. You didn't make life hard for us. They welcome us and they give us an opportunity to help ourselves, save our lives, improve our conditions, So let us be hospitable people. And that would be my call. And it's quite easy to do that, And my dream is that we do become a bilingual society, all right? Because we have so much potential to be a bilingual. Our own history speaks to it. We have Spanish, we have French, so we should be a bilingual country, and we should use the opportunity that we have now with this crisis to become a bilingual society. All right, so those will be my calls. So let's learn Spanish. All right, it's only going to benefit us as a nation if it is we integrate. So,
I love that dream. Good for you.
Yeah, let's use the opportunity because it's right there with us. And this moment that we're experiencing right now is our own history in the making. Okay, all right, because you said it's involuntary, but it's one day when writing the history books they'll say the Venezuelan exodus or the Venezuelan migration. And that's exactly the period that we're living in now. So we'll have to say how it is we benefit. And one of the best ways we can benefit is if it is we encourage the integration. All right.
So Zahira, that's a tough act to follow. I'm sorry. But yes, what would you tell the public of TNT?
I absolutely share Matthew's sentiments. And I will say that, as Catholics, we have that responsibility to promote the common good, and, be integrated in social development, especially where the Catholic social teachings are concerned, where they tell us, dignity for human life in promoting and respecting the human rights. And I'll definitely add to that in saying, you don't have to be Catholic, and you don't have to be religious. Trinidad and Tobago is so diverse. Just as a citizen of your country in Trinidad and Tobago, as a person living in a community, and as a human being, what you want for yourself is what you want for others. Do unto others as you would have do unto yourself. And I think in keeping those, it's everybody's responsibility to help in promoting the common good with the Venezuelan migrants and refugees. And I'll also add that refugees aren't something that's, a new concept in Trinidad and Tobago. We have a number of other refugees from different countries, such as Cubans. But of course, Venezuelans would definitely be our vast majority because of their crisis in Venezuela in recent years. So it's something that's not new, but to a point that you mentioned before, that now it's coming en masse in Trinidad and Tobago. It's only now starting to directly affect every individual in their communities and in their workplace. So I'll definitely call upon everyone to, as a human being, as a co-worker, a person in your own community, as a neighbor, as a friend, to help where you see persons in need. Regardless, if you have a Venezuelan that's cleaning in your workplace, see what they need, see what resources are available to them, and reach out to them. And definitely volunteer. We accept volunteers within the child-friendly spaces as well all of the time, and we have Spanish building sessions to help these volunteers in building their Spanish capacities and being able to interact and help migrants and refugees. And even Matthew's program that he mentioned before, the social justice advocacy program, which is a fantastic resource in being able to help this community. I will definitely call persons to come on board and help as much as they can, just as a human being. Yes.
And I love how you've actually just ended that, and I think this is what we're called to be right now, human beings. And we as Catholics have a duty, a responsibility to do exactly what you just said there, Zahira, promote the common good. That is why God made us Catholic and put us here on this earth. We are here to do just that. So thank you both for joining me today. It was wonderful to have you. And this was a very rich and informative discussion. And again, to reiterate, if you are interested in volunteering or learning more about social justice, or being part of your parish's ministry for migrants and refugees, please reach out to us at any time, especially on our Facebook pages. And we have a lot of work to do. So we will certainly direct you to where you as a resource, as a wonderful human resource, can maximize your potential. Okay, thank you guys. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you for joining this week's session of Ask Why. Next week, we'll be discussing food security, especially in the time of the COVID-19 pandemic, and working towards sustainable practices with the Alliance of Rural Communities. Join us next week and tune in to Ask Why.